Matt Chatham, who won 3 Super Bowls with the Patriots, and he covers them for Nesson. He writes about them for The Athletic, and he also hosts a Patriots podcast called The Real Thing. Matt's kind enough to join us here on Miller and Moulton. You can follow Matt on Twitter at Chatham58, Chatham58. Matt, top of the morning to you. Thanks for your time. How are you?
Morning, guys. Doing really well. Thank you.
Were you surprised at the news, or had there been rumblings about the news?
No, definitely surprised. I think this was something that we revisited a few different times throughout the course of the offseason. There were conversations earlier on, reports that New England would be one of the interesting spots. But then from a lot of the reporting with our actual local guy here for The Athletic, had gone back several times and said, no, there's just not. The interest isn't coming back from the New England side of this. And, we really went through, and this isn't sort of a Cam specific point, but Teddy Bridgewater, Andy Dalton, up and down the list of potential guys who might become available at a veteran quarterback spot, and really sort of went through the entire list. So I think locally we had kind of become resigned to this idea that they were going to camp, putting all their energy behind Jared Stidham. And Brian Hoyer was just sort of the right guy, right time, knows the offense back of his hand, has been in the system for many, many years. And he'd be the great bridge guy to mentor and get Stidham where he needed to go. But this does throw a curveball in it. I guess the only thing that is most telling, I guess, from this is the timing is so late and their cap space was so meager that this is essentially a veteran minimum deal, which is crazy for a guy of Cam Newton's stature. So it appears to just be an opportunity for him to make a roster. I'm not quite there to say the team has now got Cam and maybe their plans have changed. It just seems more like hey, let's take a flyer here. His values come down this much, this close to camp. Why not have a super talented guy on the team, and let's see if maybe he could pick it up and help us a little bit. But it still seems to me like the plan seems to be behind Jared.
When you look at just this move, how much more do you think this – let's just say Cam's 80% of the Cam we know. How much more does this roster still need, in your opinion, Matt?
I think the roster's in great shape. Let's put it this way. As far as talent, I think there's talent all over the roster. The question we had here locally, I think, generally was the attrition would be your quarterback position, obviously, and how they were going to sort of address that. But then defensively, you lose two big personalities here locally in Kyle Van Noy and Jamie Collins, two super talented guys out the door. Then they draft two linebackers relatively high in the draft. So it's sort of that's not a one-for-one. Those are two high-level, near Pro Bowl type guys that they lost. Then they spend high equity on backers. So it's like, okay, maybe they've taken a step back by going youth movement and saving some money there. But that was really sort of your big change. Overall, generally, the roster is essentially the same. It's just a monstrous figure like Brady not being here. Had a lot of people sort of in arms of what's going to happen. Is this really strong roster all of a sudden now going to be weaker just because of that one position? And it's obviously the most important position in football. But I think it's just going to be a really compelling camp. There are a bunch of side stories we'll be talking about. This Cam thing obviously throws in a lot of intrigue. But guys like Marquise Lee, coming back from Jacksonville, really looking to resurrect his career. And a little like Cam has had some recent injuries and not so much success in the last couple of years, but it's a really high-end guy that they got for a song, much like Cam. So I think there's a number of those sort of under-the-radar situations going on here in New England, and that's not really a surprise. Bill tends to hit on those kind of things.
So you like their roster on offense? Because obviously they're an excellent defense, and yes, they lost 4 starters, but obviously they know what they're doing on that side of the ball, and Bill finds plug-and-play guys, whether the draft or free agency or moving guys up. But boy, from a skill position standpoint, that offense got bogged down in the second half of the year last year. You think offensively they're in good shape?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the reason when we say bogged down, you have to kind of, I guess, understand what was going on with the team there late in the year. When you had Mohamed Sanu, which was, we thought, a really nice pickup midseason. He has an 11-catch game. I think second week he arrives, and he blows his ankle out. And so this guy was playing with a high ankle sprain, was just sort of limping around the field. And that they had invested there and said, that's the transition we need to make because we lost Josh Gordon. And so that's, you make the gamble, and then he gets injured, unfortunately. And Julian had been banged up. He still has a 1,000-yard season. He was still super productive, but, he's the stud. There's no sort of question of where he is in the depth chart. But you're then looking to, okay, what's the number 2 option? And, N'Keal Harry missed half the season and took a little time to pick things up. So they essentially were using this big 6'4", super talented wide receiver they get from Arizona State in the first round. It's sort of the game plan guy. Come in, we've got 2, 3, 4 plays designed for him. He's not going to get, your normal second receiver targets in the 6 and 8 range. And so then that left them a little thin. It certainly did. So now you have Muhammad, though, when they don't reveal these things until after the season. And all of a sudden Muhammad said, hey, I needed to have ankle surgery. That was actually really bad. But he's back, and they think he's good to go. So with a healthy Mohamed Sanu and N'Keal Harry with a season under his belt, as talented as he looked in the short spans we saw, and Julian come back, presumably you're now talking about an aging receiver, but that's a solid 3. I also look at Jacoby Myers as, again, these are all local stories. It's not going to be a national reverberation for a name like that, but Jacoby was an undrafted guy from NC State, really showed out well last year, is an exciting young player for them. But what I would say, from sort of the big picture view, this is not a team that went and overly spent at the receiver position. That's certainly true. It's not as if this is a heavy investment position for them. But they did draft 2 tight ends, back-to-back, 3rd, 4th round guys. The kid from Asiasi, I hope I said that right, from UCLA. It is an intriguing young guy. And then the kid, Dalton Keene, I think is the other one from Virginia Tech, right back-to-back. That they look like they're going to try to find youth production now from tight end, and tight end was the thin spot a year ago. So, I just think it's a transition year. You can certainly see that, but it just, lay bare. There's some talented guys out there. It's just we haven't yet seen them do it here for New England.
If Stidham is the long-range guy, what does that mean for Hoyer this year? We talked about this earlier. Belichick doesn't typically keep 3 QBs, but in that role of mentor that Hoyer is to Stidham, that would seem important for 2021. Do you think they'll keep 3 quarterbacks?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think if there were anyone on earth who was probably more floored by yesterday's news, it was probably Brian. And it's a tough call. This happens to veterans, unfortunately, and it's just kind of the crappy part of this business. But he took this gig, when he was no longer with Indy. He came here under the guise that you get a little opportunity to compete for a starting job because Jared is the future potentially, but he's still unproven. And, you take a gig like that, you ride it for 6-7 months of off-season football, and then something this tantalizing is available at such a low cost. They jumped, and it's pretty hard to fault the Pats for going ahead and taking a chance on this Newton thing. But to your point of whether or not you keep 3, they're obviously very different kinds of players. Jarrett Stidham has some mobility to him, but I think he's closer to the mold of like a Darnold or, not Josh Allen. It's more of a big arm guy, big body guy, but he's more of a pocket guy that can leave, maybe Tannehill-esque, I guess. So it's a different kind of sort of offense you would build around a guy like him versus Cam, and Cam has been a pest for New England for years. That he's always performed well against this organization. So when Cam's in, you're back into the pistol. There's an option element. The quarterback is a definite runner on just about every other play. So I don't know how one does that, and maybe they don't either. I would imagine they don't either. They just say, man, Cam is so incredibly talented. This is a generational talent kind of guy that's available for a song. Let's get him on the roster. Let's see what happens. So to all of the best laid plans we had about backups and mentoring and getting all that stuff, and maybe that's still alive. Maybe Cam struggles to pick this up, and this wasn't the best option, but it was the only option apparently he had at this juncture, and nothing comes of it. But there's also a possibility that, hey, your young quarterback goes into the season as a starter. A few weeks he struggles, and you went ahead and kept Cam on your roster. And he picks it up. He's showing health, and wow, you all of a sudden you've got a former MVP candidate running your team. So maybe it's just a very inexpensive insurance policy that they picked up at the last minute that doesn't have much to do with the mentoring part. But why not try?
So you believe that Stidham is still number 1 on the depth chart, and that Cam is just going to push the heck out of him and be there just in case? Or do you think that this is one of the rare quarterback competitions, that this is essentially Chicago's training camp with Foles and Trubisky? Do you think this job is now up for grabs, or do you think it's still Stidham's with Cam being very impatient?
I think that's actually a pretty good contrast. I like that one because with Foles and Trubisky, they made the Foles decision in March or whatever it was, right? So they basically spent this entire offseason, those guys learning their offense. They're zooming, I guess, unfortunately, not actually working on the field, but at least with sort of a long many month plan kind of thing to where this is going to eventually ascend to, and somebody's going to have to pull out. I think it kind of sucks for Cam, quite frankly, because he's such a good player. If he's healthy. He's going to arrive on July 28th like all the other players and learn New England's offense and lead an entire organization. It just seems like a little far-fetched to me. I would imagine you walk out there the very first practice, the first time these guys are allowed to go live, and the reps with the first group is probably going to be Jarrett most likely. And even the twos potentially with Brian, taking over that group. And I think it's just a matter of how quickly can Cam pick it up. And it's different. Again, I think it stinks. It's very unfair to a quarterback in this kind of situation because you have to know everything. Again, it's not now. If we were talking about sort of could pick up a quick game plan for a week, and we're gonna they did this with Jacoby Brissett, and then again that's not a great example because Jacoby had been in house as a rookie, but they quickly put together a game plan for Jarrett when the suspension happened, and he had a nice Jacoby had a really nice week, but it was a 1 week thing. Step back the next week and okay, now what are we going to do long term? So I just think that would be the challenge with Cam. And I don't know him personally, and not that anyone this I think would be incredibly difficult for anyone to do if they just arrive here and the team is on this truncated offseason. They gotta get this, they got to get this going just like all the other teams do. So you can't screw around with that position too much. I would say more likely that Cam battles just from straight ability, picks it up on the fly, maybe a month into camp or getting towards the end of preseason here. And it's like, okay, the comfort level, this guy's starting to get something. He can push, but you do got to get those first team reps and kind of figure out who you're going to be on a shortened off season. So I would imagine, Jarrett's the thought, but they're open to being convinced it could be something else. But I don't think that's what would be happening day one necessarily.
The players will know. I mean, obviously Bill will know, but at some point, if Jared doesn't have it, if you know what I mean. You guys all know when you're in camp. Like you said, when you start going live with the ones, how quick would they make a change if it's that obvious that Cam's the guy? How does that work in camp?
Yeah, I mean, it's so as my understanding, just sort of talking to some coach friends around the league, is there's going to be this weird adjustment period that everyone's going through this particular season. And that's because they haven't had their hands on the players, poor metaphor, but they haven't had them around the building. So you're not going to jump in day one. You do your conditioning test, everyone passes their physical, light day or two, and then we're going to basically put the pads on and go, or at least start, doing full speed stuff. These guys haven't done a passing camp or a mini camp. So my understanding is there's a lot of feeling around the league that there might be a couple week of feeling out time here where it isn't necessarily team periods. You don't want your corners or your receivers or anyone to just break it out full speed and, try to put the pedal to the metal. You don't want a quick injury. That's the thing that everyone fears right now. So there might be this weird oddball week, 10 days, maybe 2 of just straight learning, running around at sort of a mild pace, get some conditioning after, kind of feel for the first couple weeks. And I think that maybe that helps Cam in this situation where, he's just going to be spending nights late with the quarterback group or the quarterback coach or OC or whatever, trying to get this all down, because you got to call everyone's responsibility. You got to call the huddle. You have to know all the protection. You have to know everything about this, which generally been a pretty complicated offense. Doesn't mean they can't scale it back, but there's learning that has to happen before you just run out and take over the whole thing. So I would say to the notion of when these things, the sort of getting to know you period, maybe individual drills. We're just talking about one-on-one pass drills, quarterback throwing to receivers covered by a DB or something like that. You're going to see those for a couple of weeks. But once you get into live team stuff, I imagine, again, initially Jarrett's going to be taking that stuff over. In situations like this, though, when you're coming in sort of in a bad spot and you're going to start competing, it generally takes the front guy to do something wrong first. He has to – you got to show that, hey, man, I got this at an accelerated rate that no one thought I would. And the other guy stumbles a little bit. But again, I'm guessing that's 3, 4, or 5 weeks into the process till that transition happens. They generally just, with any new guy, you're in the building, put your nose down and just try to learn this stuff. And we'll get into the picking you guy versus you guy, 6-7 weeks from now.
Matt, thanks for the time. Appreciate your insight. All the best to you and the family, and hopefully we can talk again late in camp.
All right, guys, take care.
Matt Chatham won 3 rings with the Patriots, and he covers them for Nesson, writes about them for The Athletic, and also hosts a Patriots podcast called The Real Thing. Follow Matt on Twitter at Chatham58.